Welcome to Justice Trek. My name is Ted Kilvington, and this is an audio and video log that journeys through comic book history as I discuss individual comic book stories of Star Trek, the Justice Society, and the world's greatest superheroes, the Justice League of America. Justice Trek is the only show devoted to the entirety of these great comic book series, from the 1940 debut of the JSA, the launch of the JLA and Star Trek comic books in the 1960s, and right up to comics hot off today's shelves. This show will impact you in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey, welcome to Justice Trek episode 13. My name is Ted Kilvington, and today I will be talking about Justice League of America number 160 from 1978. This is the comic. I have two copies of this story. This is not the copy I bought at the time. That did not survive my teenage years. But I have this version, and I have a version in the Crisis on Infinite Earths box set. I will be talking about the comic with Ross Aitken of the Stop Let's Team Up podcast. He and I discussed the first part of that 1978 JLA JSA team up in the episode 11, and then episode 12 I talked about Star Trek number 4 from 1980, and now Ross and I are back together to finish our discussion of the 1978 JLA JSA team up. Got a lot of great previous episodes out there besides the ones I mentioned. Please, they're all available on YouTube. I hope you enjoy them. And if you do enjoy them, please click like, please click subscribe. All right. Now, in this issue, I'm not going to go into any big background about the characters. I've talked about most of them before. But the main characters in this issue, from the Justice League of Earth 1, we have Superman, Barry Allen Flash, Hawkman Katar Hall from Planet Thanagar, and Elongated Man Ralph Dibny. From the Justice Society of Earth 2, we have Wonder Woman, Dr. Midnight, the Star-Spangled Kid, and Helena Wayne, the Huntress. Our big guest stars this issue are the Black Pirate, the British nobleman turned privateer known as John Valor, Viking Prince, the son of the leader of a tribe of Norse warriors in the 900s, who is known as John Haraldson, Miss Liberty, the U.S. Revolutionary War nurse turned costume fighter known as Elizabeth Lynn, Enemy Ace, the extremely principled German military officer, pilot, and ace during the First World War, known as Rittmeister Hans von Hammer, and Jonah Hex, the bounty hunter that operated in the western United States in the 1870s. Other members of the two teams appear in this issue. From the Justice League of Earth 1, we have Aquaman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern Hal Jordan, Green Arrow, the Atom, the Black Canary, the Red Tornado, and Hawkgirl. From the Justice Society of Earth 2, we have Superman, Flash, Green Lantern Alan Scott. That was Flash Jay Garrick, by the way. And we have Dr. Fate. Now, I'm going to go through, give you a little background information about part 1 of the story, in case you haven't seen that episode yet. And then we'll get into part 2, which will be Ross and I will be talking about today. So, in issue 159, the Lord of Time launches a scheme to control the flow of time through a living computer called the Eternity Brain. But to correct a fatal flaw in his scheme, he is forced to draw 5 heroes out of the past, give them superpowers, and pit them against the Justice League and Justice Society. The Viking Prince, Jonah Hex, Miss Liberty, Enemy Ace, and the Black Pirate cause an explosion at the joint meeting of the two teams, which sidelines all but 8 members of the groups. In a follow-up battle, the Viking Prince and Black Pirate defeat the Flash, the Huntress, the Dr. Midnight, Elongated Man, and the Wonder Woman of Earth 2, while Superman, Hawkman, and the Star-Spangled Kid fall before the forces of an airborne Enemy Ace, Jonah Hex, and Miss Liberty. As they recover, the Justice League heroes set out As they recover, the Justice League and Justice Society heroes set out to avenge their defeat, which is precisely the Time Lord's intention, as his irrevocably programmed computer will stop the flow of time forever, unless the JLA and JSA can prevent it. So the synopsis for both issue 159 and for 160 were obtained from the official Justice League of America Index number 5, published in 1985 by Independent Comics Group. Justice League of America number 160 was published on August 10, 1978, with a November cover date and a 50-cent cover price. The story was titled Crisis from Tomorrow. That's not to be confused with the 1976 Justice League number 137, where the JLA, JSA, and the Shazam Squadron from Earth S, those three all met in JLA number 137 and a couple other issues. But this issue, number 137, the story was titled Crisis in Tomorrow, and the story from issue number 160 in 1978 was Crisis from Tomorrow. So don't confuse Crisis in Tomorrow with Crisis from Tomorrow. Okay? Two separate comics. Okay, this story was 25 pages long and was written by Jerry Conway. Dick Dillon did the pencil art, Frank McLaughlin did the ink art, Ben Oda was the letterer, Carl Gafford was the colorist, Julia Schwartz was the editor, and the cover art was by Dick Dillon and Frank McLaughlin. The synopsis is, and again, it's from the Justice League Index. While Aquaman sees to the comatose JLA and JSA members taken out of action by the explosion in the previous issue, the 5 heroes from the past realize that they have been used as pawns and attack the Time Lord's extra-dimensional headquarters, only to be defeated by the Eternity Brain's time-warping powers. When the remaining Justice League and Justice Society members also attack, only to be thrown into the same coma-like state as their comrades, it is up to the Elongated Man, the last remaining hero, to short-circuit the living computer using his rubber-limbed body. The heroes of the past are turned to their proper time periods, and the League and Society members are revived. Okay, I'm going to show the credits now. I like to do the credits in the middle of the episode so people sit through them. After the credits, I'm going to take you to my Skype conversation with Ross. Now, his full name is Thomas Ross Aitken, so on the Skype screen, it'll show Thomas Aitken, but everyone calls him Ross. At least everyone is part of the comics community. All right. So I hope you are liking what you're seeing, and if you're liking it, please click like, please click subscribe, watch the credits, and then come back here for my Skype conversation with Ross Aitken about Justice League of America number 160 from 1978. If you have questions or comments, please feel free to send them to me on Twitter under the handle @JusticeTrek or via email at thejusticetrek@gmail.com. Be sure to include the word "the" at the beginning of the email address. For research purposes, I rely heavily on dc.fandom.com, memory-alpha.fandom.com, comicvine.gamespot.com, the Grand Comics Database at comics.org, and Mike Boyle's website, Mike's Amazing World of DC Comics at dcindexes.com. The opinions expressed are solely those of the host and any participants. This podcast is not a commercial enterprise and does not make any money. All copyrights are held by their respective owners. The opening sequence was animated by Craig Smith of Phoenix Studios. The opening music is Dragon Slayer by the Makai Symphony. All music used is either public domain and/or not protected by copyright. Under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comments, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
Okay, welcome back, Ross. Thanks for joining me for the to cover the second half of the 1978 JLA JSA team up.
Thank you. My
Uh,
pleasure.
Now, in the our first half of our discussion, we talked about issue 159. Now, and we also talked about the characters, so we don't need to rehash that. But what are your initial thoughts about issue 160?
I think it flowed a little bit better than the other one. Um, there's some, I like that the heroes of the past get the action at the beginning and they're doing something heroic. They're going to battle the Lord of Time. They're not happy about being used.
Right.
They didn't want to do this, and they've still got their powers. And of course, they battle a dinosaur.
Oh yeah,
Because it's
this
a time travel story.
Yeah, I think this would be the first time that the enemy ace flew his triplane near a dinosaur, but it definitely would not be the last. I know in Showcase number 100, which came out earlier in 78, enemy ace was in that, and some dinosaurs were in that, although I don't know if enemy ace actually encountered a dinosaur. But I do recall in the 1992 Armageddon Inferno miniseries, they made a big point of having enemy ace engage dinosaurs.
Oh my God. I forgot about that. That's hysterical. I like it. It's just DC had a thing with what was it, the island that time forgot,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
was
the
big
war.
in their war stuff. Yeah. But it's always, if you're gonna have a time travel thing, someone's gonna meet a dinosaur, and and I like the Viking Prince hits it in the shin with his super powered mace.
Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, and I definitely agree with you. After these historical heroes were basically doing the bidding of the Lord of Time in the first book, it's nice to see them standing up to him in the second book. And basically, yeah, the first half of part of the second issue is basically just about them fighting the dinosaurs and the lizard men.
Yeah, I like how that he super evolves the dinosaur into like lizard men. So you're battling an ancient dinosaur and then a super evolved, looks like a crocodile.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I remember at the time, it reminded me of the Slee Stacks from Land of the Lost.
Yeah, it does look like a sleaze. They need his Chaka running around.
Yeah.
Oh,
And of course, the historical heroes were still had their radiation based powers at that time. And even though they were using, their Black Pirate was using his sword, and Jonah Hex was using his pistols, and Viking Prince had his battle axe, there's still no lizard blood drawn. And granted, it was a code approved comic, but I don't know. I would just think if you're going into battle with a sword and fighting for your life, something's getting chopped.
yeah. I mean that they don't even want to damage like the alien because in comics in the past you couldn't kill, no one killed, no one died, so you can't even harm animals.
Right.
Yeah, even the Slee stacks are attacking. Um, but they're defeated. Like heroes in old comics is first half of the battle you're knocked unconscious, second half of the battle you win.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but it was a fun, good page. I forget how much I like Dylan and his storytelling. So I thought those are fun pages.
Yeah. Yeah. Dick Dillon was, well, I mean, he was literally the Justice League artist for the 70s. I mean, he drew all but one issue of Justice League in the 70s. Um, and yeah, it's kind of the template. I know, like one time uh, online, there was a discussion of Justice League writers. Who's your favorite Justice League writer? And I mentioned some, and then somebody else said, "Well, you don't like Gardner Fox." And then I was thinking about it, and I was like, Gardner Fox would never have occurred to me, because to me, he's not a Justice League writer. It's like, who's your favorite Beatles cover band? He's not. Oh, he is the Justice League, Gardner Fox. So
Yeah.
everyone else is just doing their take on it.
Yeah,
So it's same to me. It's the same with Dylan. Dylan is the Justice League artist. Everyone else is doing their take on it.
I agree with you. Gardner Fox is everybody after him is doing him, and they may tweak it. And I don't think Stan really tweaks it, but I do think people like Roy and Len and Jerry tweak it. To make it, little. I mean, Gardner wrote it when it was only for younger. They weren't gearing their audience any farther. So, but they're still just doing that. It's still just Gardner Fox. We team up, we break, we split apart, we win.
Right.
And it's.
And I didn't read the 1973 Avengers Defenders War storyline until I was about 40 years old. But I was struck then by how much of an homage it was to those Gardner Fox stories.
Oh, yeah, it's Englehart doing it's a love letter to Jerry. It's Englehart doing a love letter to classic superhero teams and Gardner Fox, because it even's got the thing with the logos of the heroes when they split up. That's a Justice League thing. That is not an Avenger thing ever. I'm a huge Englehart's my guy. My first Avenger comic was his first comic. So, I've read that story.
Well,
Good God, 20, 30 times.
Yeah. The first Justice League comic I ever bought on my own was Jerry Conway's first issue, 151. I had read others before then that were, I borrowed or were given or whatever. But that was the first time I actually went into a store with my own money and bought a Justice League. It was Jerry Conway's first.
Well, that's cool. I'm a big fan of Jerry. I went out and bought his New Gods hardcover just because one, it's him, and two, it's Don Newton.
Yeah.
So, but I forget how much he did. I pick on my wife. It's like, you should know his name. You watch Law and Order in a loop. And she's like, why? He's a script editor. He has been since the beginning. I don't want to imagine how much money he has. And he wrote more comics than I could count.
Oh, yeah. Especially after the DC implosion, which was literally happening like right in the middle of these issues we're covering.
Yeah.
I remember reading, I think it was in the book DC Implosion, maybe the Tomorrow's book. But because the DC line contracted so much from early 78 to late 78, and because he had a contract with DC that guaranteed him, so much work, he was writing like a quarter of all DC comics at that time.
Good God.
Just because of the contract he was given. I mean, he was writing, Justice League and Legion, and he was doing issues of DC Comics Presents. He did a lot of those.
I forgot he did Legion. It's not, it's okay.
Yeah, his Legion, between the first and second Paul Levitz runs, Jerry Conway wrote some, and then Roy Thomas wrote a few. But
I'm a huge Roy fan, but his Legion is terrible.
Yeah, to me, if Gardner Fox is the Justice League writer, then Paul Levitz is the Legion writer for me. I'd read some of the older ones before, but I read the 70s Legion stories first, and then later read the other ones. So the first ones that made their impression on me were the Levitz ones. And nothing against the earlier ones. If I had read them first, they might have been.
Oh, yeah. It's the way I am. My first one is, someone just posted it today. It's the Return of Timberwolf. That's the first Legion comic I ever read. So my first artist is Cochran, which is a good starting place. And I don't know if it's Shooter 2, because Shooter came back and wrote it, or it was Cary Bates, because that time it was a mix-match, because like Levitz, Shooter had two runs. He had his Silver Age run, and then he had his second one in the Silver Age. And his second one was good, but they were short stories at that point.
Right. Yeah, and if I
And so,
recall correctly, we're getting off the track talking about Shooter's Legion, not
no,
not
but
Conway's
back to
Justice League.
Conway.
But yeah, with Shooter, his first run on the Legion was kind of revolutionary. He just did. It was such a big change from the way
Oh my God, yeah.
Hamilton and Jerry Siegel were writing the Legion.
I think
Whereas,
it's a big change in super team writing a little bit too, because it is drastic.
oh yeah, but by the time his second run, like Cary Bates, who'd been writing Legion for several years at that point, he'd already kind of adapted to Shooter's style. So he was basically Shooter wasn't reinventing himself a second time. He was just coming back to do what he'd already done. So
Yeah,
it wasn't bad. It's just it's like, okay, he invented a new tool 10 years ago, and now he's coming back and he's just using that same tool that he invented.
yeah,
It's just,
he did it have to adapt because he was going from 223 to 22 page stories.
yeah.
For his stories where he's the one that started doing the two-parters, and then he was having to do a 12 issue. I mean, like an 11 pager because it was a backup. Because I think I don't think he does when it becomes the main thing in Superboy. I think it's Levitz by then.
Well,
So, but yeah,
yeah, yeah.
but that, I mean, but Conway's like that. I mean, but Conway's like that on certain books too. And he was like Justice League. Because he leaves and comes back.
Well, Conway, yeah, he did like one story arc in '76, and then he left he did like a month at Marvel as editor in chief.
Yeah, it's his turn in the rotation.
Yeah, and then after Englehart left Justice League, Conway was tapped as the replacement, and he wrote like for 6 years, and then took a year off, then came back for the Detroit League.
Yeah.
And then that lasted. His run on the Detroit League lasted 2 years before he quit, and then I don't think he's come back for Justice League since then.
No, I can't remember when he retired from comics. He just kind of disappeared after he did the Conan movies, I guess.
Yeah, well, of course, yeah, he and Roy did the Conan movies, and they both moved out to LA, and then Conway basically got involved. I don't know if Conway moved out to LA. I know Roy did. But either way, Conway got involved in as a TV writer, and while his work on Law and Order, he's done quite well for himself in television. Lord knows. The only reason I don't watch more Law and Order is because there's only so much of it that's available on streaming. I mean, if they made every Law and Order available on streaming, I would probably be watching it every day.
My wife plays it in a loop. She's found, and she watches the new stuff. But I mean, Conway's prolific. I don't think he writes much anymore. I just think he's a producer and an editor at this point. He just, where's my check? So, well, that's it. I mean, another tangent. Sorry about that, but it's
That's okay. I actually at one point I thought about calling the show "Getting Back to Justice League" because in almost every time I have a conversation with somebody else covering one of these comics, we go off on tangents. So yeah, I thought about just calling the show "Getting Back to Justice League." Yeah, the first half of the second issue was the historical heroes fighting the lizards. And then the second half of the second issue was the 4 JLA and JSA members traveling through time to the Lord of Time's fortress. It's like Lord of Time, of course, wanted the heroes to come and destroy the Eternity Brain. He didn't want to alert the Eternity Brain to his plan. So he left the chronal energy trail that the heroes were able to follow to his time fortress. And then one by one, the JLA and JSA were knocked unconscious, just like the other ones had been knocked unconscious in the restaurant scene in the first part. So it was definitely, I did like the way that the action was set up. So basically you had, I know that the chapters don't always line up, but to me it read like, Act 1, the restaurant attack. Act 2, the Valley Forge encounter. Act 3, historical heroes fight lizards. Act 4, JLA and JSA destroy the Eternity Brain.
Yeah, with a couple epilogues, like for some exposition, like what's happening with the other heroes, and
Yeah.
a little refresher on Earth 1, Earth 2, which they would do every issue.
Right.
So
And then Aquaman, I like how he popped up in 160 to he was not at the restaurant, so he was
because he was on monitor duty. I like that.
Yeah.
I was on duty. What happened?
The worst thing that happened in the world was the monitor duty was the fact that the Justice League was attacked on Earth. If they and that's why they're in the future JLA JSA team ups, they all do it at the satellite. They don't bother doing it at offsite because they didn't want to be attacked again.
Yeah, but you're right about this one. It's a classic trope, especially in, I think, in DC Comics more, where a group of heroes go on a thing and then they're whittled down. It's the maze. It's kind of like, I call it when I talk about Legion, and especially early Legion, the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
They have to get through the maze, or they have to solve a problem. In old Legion stories, someone's already known the answer, but just kept their mouth shut so they could do it. But in this one, it's like, it's a war of attrition to get to the inside. And I kind of like that.
And it was just writer's choice as to the order in which the heroes dropped off. I mean, you might normally think, that Superman would be the only one to make it to the end, but he's was like the first of the heroes from '78 to get taken down as they stormed the fortress.
I like that they turn him in because he's a little weakened, and they can't break this barrier. So Star Spangled Kid infuses his body with cosmic energy, I guess was what's in his belt, and Diana throws him through like a battering ram, and he's knocked unconscious. I like that a lot. It's like, okay, we're just going to throw you through the wall and then keep going.
Yeah. And on the one hand, again, it strikes me as a little far-fetched to think that the only hero that could survive to the end was the Elongated Man. But it did play up the stakes. So, as you're like both you, the reader, and the Elongated Man are thinking as this is happening, if Superman couldn't make it this far and Wonder Woman couldn't make it this far, I mean, at this point, 2 Wonder Women and 2 Supermen had been taken out. Then what hope does this stretchy guy have?
Yeah, and he becomes, when you get to like page 21 in this second one, everybody's dropping. He's really upset that his buddy Flash is unconscious. So you get they don't do any dialogue, but you see that it's wearing on the characters. I like that they're kind of the 4, because you've got guy Stretches, and then 2 people that just have normal human abilities, just are good fighters. One can see in the dark, and Sylvester, who's got the cosmic belt, but they're not the big guns. And I kind of think that Dylan does a good thing of portraying that in 4 silent panels. There's no dialogue. I'm just gonna I'm gonna let you see that these guys are wearing down, and Conway doesn't. I don't know how Conway and Dylan worked. Probably not the Marvel method.
Yeah, DC preferred scripts over full scripts over the Stan Lee plot script method. Most of the writer or artists at DC definitely preferred to have all of the action broken down. And just from what limited comic book writing I've done, it's like, just in terms of time, it takes time to type out what's happening in each individual panel. So somebody needs to make those decisions, to break that story down into the panels. If the writer isn't taking the time to do it, and the artist is taking that story and then breaking it down, then the artist should get paid more. Because basically a third of comic book writing is taking the story and breaking it down to the panels.
Yeah.
When you've got the story and the dialogue, those are the other 2/3.
I think that's why DC went to the co-creators, because didn't they do the co-creators first?
Yeah, I think they were the first to do it.
Because Marv and George were like, this is gonna be a dual credit.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean,
but
go ahead.
I think Dylan could. I mean, Dylan, God, he drew a lot of comics. So, I mean, most of what I've read is his Justice League. I've seen some of his Challengers, or Blackhawks. It's his Blackhawks because he drew the Blackhawks when they had superpowers.
Yeah.
So
yeah, in the first issue where they were transforming, actually the first 3 issues where they were transforming from the fighter pilots to the superheroes, Superman, Batman, Green Lantern, and Flash were in those issues.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they were like supervising their transition for the government or something like that.
Yeah.
And that was actually the first time that Dick Dillon drew the Justice League.
Oh, really? That's cool. I like that.
Yeah, that was kind of his audition, because right around the time that he took over on Justice League, they were giving up on the superhero thing in Blackhawk, and they were just so they said, okay, well, not since the Blackhawk isn't working out anymore, they just moved him over to Justice League to replace Sikowski.
Yeah, which is, I think, a good move. I will say this, and won't be long, but folks, if you've never seen it, Google Dick Dillon Blackhawk superhero costumes. They're atrocious.
Yes, they are.
They make no sense. Oh, wait a minute, they make too much sense. I don't know.
Like the Chuck from Blackhawk was the listener, and he had ears covering, like 24 ears scattered all over his pants and shirt.
Were they functioning ears, or were they just like embroidered ears? Because I've not read them.
Well, I think, if I recall correctly, I think they were just random ears that were just, kind of, scattered all over his shirt and pants.
Oh my
so
goodness.
It was a really bizarre look.
It is. When I was a kid, and my first Justice League artist is Dick Dillon, like he was for people for a generation.
Yeah.
And I would go back, and I really didn't like Sikowski. I do now go back and go, well, you're an idiot, because Sikowski's an incredibly good artist.
Yes.
It's just different. And to think between issue 1 and issue 200, say, at that, or well, when Perez takes over, I mean, that's a long run with only 3 artists.
Definitely.
It's unique, and I think you get 3 unique looks. And back to the story we're doing is, I like to speed up the story. Is 3 when they're down to 4, and then an incredibly Dick Dillon giant robot knocks out 3 of them with 1 punch.
Yeah. This
looks like Construct. He has a certain style with robots that I really love. They all look like wind-up robots from like the 50s. Yeah. And I think they're gorgeous. And I think it's a neat little battle, and it's because he basically they turn the story over to Ralph on page 21. And it's all about Ralph solving the puzzle.
Yeah, and then he basically, literally stretches his way inside the Eternity Brain to destroy it.
Yeah, it ends really quickly. I mean, in that one page, he does it, and Lord of Time's just banging on it, going, stop! Why aren't you doing what I built you? Why aren't you doing what I told you?
Yeah.
So. But it's a nice ending, and I like Ralph. I'm always been a big fan of Ralph and Sue, and especially Ralph and Sue.
Yeah. It was a shame what they did to them in Identity Crisis.
Yeah, it wasn't necessary.
No. It was just shock value, and it was unnecessary shock value.
Yeah, I think at time in the 80s and 90s, it was more that you wanted everybody had to be all heroes had to be angsty.
Yeah.
Why are you doing it? Oh, there's a line in one of the Marvel movies. Was it the Marvel movies where one of the characters talks about all the heroes and goes, "What's this thing with rich orphans?" You know? And I was like, "Oh God, it's everywhere." You know?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
rich orphans. Um, you know, and then you get the big group shot at the end, and Ralph's in the hospital, and there's Sue checking out on him. I think at some point the Golden Age Superman does not appear in the final panels. I think he's inserted everywhere.
Yeah, he was drawn
At the
in
hospital.
in
At
the
the hospital
hospital.
bed. Yeah. Um, and it
But
was, you know, I think I liked the second issue a little more because it's just a little tighter. Um, it follows the
yeah,
formula, but I don't mind that it follows the formula because it works.
right. And yeah, I definitely prefer the second issue also. I mean, for one thing, you get a resolution, which you did not really get. I mean, even as a midway point, like I said, another kid I knew at the time read the first part and didn't even realize that there was going to be a second part. You know, he's just like, okay, well, the heroes lost that one. All right, next issue.
Yeah.
Um, so uh, yeah, the second issue definitely had a more clear resolution. I like the fact that, you know, again, the historical heroes, they didn't get to be heroes in the first one, so they like to see them actually stand up for themselves in the second one.
Yeah. I want to ask you something. I've read the Lord of Time stories. I've always found him to be a very weak kind of villain. Is he always? I mean, I'd have to go back and read the early, like the first time he appeared, because it's been years since I've read it. But is he always this inept?
Pretty much. I mean, I haven't. Well, I've read all the ones in the original run of the Justice League. I'm trying to recall if they did any Lord of Time stories after the original Justice League run.
I don't think
I
anybody's used him. I think he's kind of a forgotten villain.
right. So, but yeah, he definitely he's the classic uh time villain that he uses time travel as a way of stealing stuff. Um and unfortunately, you know, he also wants power. He's not he's the DC kind of time villain, where he's not so much in it for the power, like say Kang at Marvel, but he's mostly in it for the loot. And that's having a villain who's in it for the loot. I think really limits the type of stories that you can tell. It's like you need to give the guy more to do than just stealing stuff.
Yeah, it because it's the thing of the mixing up. You can't ever. Not every villain has to be a homicidal maniac, like say the Joker. They don't have to be a world conqueror, say like Vandal Savage. And I kind of like how when they tweak heroes, villains like that, say this is their expertise. Ostrander did it with Penguin. You know that he's not wahaha villain. He's a thief, and he is a criminal.
Yeah,
He's a very good criminal. It's about loot. It's about planning a thing, not bringing any attention to you. But like with Lord of Time, it's like, what are you in for it? Is it revenge? And then you build a crappy computer that got out of control?
pretty much.
You know, it's
It's
like
like, oh,
you're so
I
inept
mean,
you
he
feel that
wanted to stop the flow of time, so it'd be easier to loot time.
yeah.
And what he didn't realize is it's like there's no off switch. And like it's like, you know, it's like the first thing they invented after the first automobile was automobile brakes.
You know, it's like, you know, you're from it, you know, it's, I mean, I know when this was written, computers were, did people like Jerry, how much did he know what a computer could do? So they're
Yeah,
getting it all from 50 science fiction. This is a very 50 science fiction kind of computer.
right. And it wasn't until the 80s that computers became commonplace in people's homes.
Oh yeah, yeah,
I mean, there were a few people. I think like in the late 70s, you know, they had like the first Radio Shack computers and stuff. But yeah, it wasn't until the 80s until they became more commonplace.
oh yeah.
And of
I'm
course, we're just now have reached an age where AI is kind of at the level that science fiction writers were imagining 50 odd years ago.
Yeah.
But even then, it's like if your computer is plugged in and it gets out of control, you just pull the plug. You just don't give it a. I remember
take its food away, take its
Well,
power
yeah,
away.
it's like I remember a few years ago there was this doll that they was made for kids, and the doll would pretend to eat food, and so like you had these like fake play food that you would put in the doll's mouth, and the doll would nibble on the play food. Well, what was happening was Christmas morning, some girls with long hair would get their long hair in the doll's mouth, and the doll would be nibbling the girl's hair, and the parents were like freaking out. And then I remember I was watching a report on it on the news, and then the news guy who was the news anchor who was interviewing someone, it's like, well, didn't the parents think to just take the batteries out of the doll? Because with no batteries, the doll's going to stop chewing.
Oh my God. I think I remember that story. It's sad for me. Oh, I know. It's like the conversations about AI. I've been following the writer's strike, and I was my buddy who's a computer guy. It's like AI will only do what you tell it to do. I said my thing is someone's going to tell it to do something effed up.
Well,
someone's already tried that, to see what it would do. But I don't, because I've said I'm not going to support any AI generated writing.
Right. Yeah.
Or
yeah.
if a movie uses the likeness of somebody and the actor's not on the set, I'm not paying for that.
Okay.
That kind of thing. But yeah, but he had the worst crazy AI.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I hear my wife calling. So we've been talking for an hour and a half now. So let's cut it short. The plan is I'll put half of this recording in one episode, and then the other half will be in the second episode. They'll be coming out on the next 2 Fridays. That's the plan.
Yeah, just send me the link when you post them, and I'll share them.
Okay, well, I will do. All right. Well, thank you, Ross, for joining me. It's always a blast talking with you, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Thank you, sir. I had a fun.
All right, take care. Bye.
Hey, I hope you really enjoyed my conversation with Ross. I know I had a blast, and I think he did too. And hopefully it was great for you as well. So if you like what Ross's podcasting style, you can check him out. He's available on most podcasting apps. His show is titled Stop, Let's Team Up. And his Twitter handle, you can find him talking about lots of things, is at JSA4E. So basically, I really liked these issues at the time. As an adult, not quite as much. I mean, they weren't bad, but I just think they could have been better. But hey, I still love the Justice League. Okay, it's just as a kid, you like things as a child does, which means you look up to them. As an adult, you've got more perspective, and you judge things with a little more critical tone. I mean, they are comic books, so on the one hand, I don't expect them to be compared to Shakespeare, or in the art, I don't expect to be hanging in the Louvre. But at the same time, it's certainly fair to compare comics of the time to other comics of the time and judge them within that context. And within that context, certainly now that I'm older and I've read a lot more comics from the late 1970s, I just think that the story could have been better. Love Dick Dillon's art. To me, Dick Dillon is the Justice League artist, and everyone else is doing their take on Dillon's Justice League. So no criticism there. So if you like this episode, of course, we have previous episodes. Episode 9 was a special 4-part episode where I talked about Showcase number 100. I did it in 4 parts because I actually had 2.5 hours of stuff to talk about. and didn't want people to try and sit through it all. Plus, of course, for file size reasons, it was harder to upload. So I just broke it up into smaller parts. Now, the announcement tweets for all 4 parts, episodes 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, and 9.4, were retweeted on Twitter by Ed Moore of Teal Productions. Thank you, Ed. If you have a chance, folks, please, you can follow Ed and Teal Productions and give his show a listen. I caught my first episode of his as part of the JL May crossover in May 2023, and really enjoyed it. And so hopefully you should check it out and you enjoy it too. So check out Ross, check out Ed. Also on YouTube, on episode 9.1, we had a comment from a person, YouTube users under the username Ocelot Who Came to Tea. And Ocelot Who Came to Tea said, I remember buying this in 1978, and it really held together well. And the Staten, that's Joe Staten, the pencil artist, his art is excellent. And we are now up to 49 subscribers on YouTube. Just remember, I've got previous episodes out there for your viewing and listening pleasure. Of course, we have episode 9, but we also have episode 10, where I covered Star Trek number 400 from IDW, published in 2022. We've got episode 11, the first part of my discussion with Ross of the JLA JSA team up from 1978. Episode 12, where I covered 1980 Star Trek number 4 from Marvel Comics. Also coming up, we have in episode 14, we will have Star Trek number 5 from Marvel Comics in 1980. And in episode 15, we will be, I say we in the royal reasons, we all know what I mean. I will be talking about the 2022 one-shot, The New Golden Age from DC Comics, featuring the Justice Society of America. As I say in the opening credits, or the opening animation sequence, we're journeying through all eras of comic book history. So I've talked about the first appearance of the JSA from 1940, and now I'm going to get into their current stuff. So I really hope you like what I'm doing, and if you do, please click like, please click subscribe. Thank you very much for giving me your time and attention, and keep on Justice Trekking.